Welcome back. You're listening to the 123 show this afternoon with me, Karen Coe, and it is 1:33, and I'm joined by two guests in the studio to talk about co-working. So co-working spaces have popped up all over Hong Kong, from Kwun Tong to Kennedy Town, and there's really so much choice now about where to plop down your laptop and grab a hot desk. So I wanted to find out more about what it's really like to be in one of these spaces. And joining me now are Mark Erder of APV and Angela Bauer of Inspira. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And we are also on Facebook Live, so if you go to my Facebook page, Karen, on RTHK Radio 3, you can see and hear both Mark and Angela. So maybe you should tell us first about the nature of your business first and your work. So Mark, do you want to go first? Just tell us about what business you're in.
I run a small video communications agency. We started out as a news organization doing boutique packaging of programs for international broadcasters. And today we predominantly do corporate, commercial, and social media videos. Okay,
so you have staff, you have equipment, right?
Yep.
So you have very specific needs for your work.
Very.
Okay.
Very.
And Angela, what about you?
I'm a writer. I write for publications and businesses that strive to do good. Some of the topics that I cover are quite challenging, emotionally challenging, and so working from home just is not a good idea.
Okay. And you work on your own?
I work on my own. I have a team of two, and they come in to see me sometimes at the co-working space, but predominantly I'm on my own.
Okay, so they don't need to be with you every single day?
Not every single day.
Okay.
No. I think we drive each other insane. We work together all the time.
Yes. So maybe, Angela, tell us about all the different kinds of office spaces you've worked in and how you ended up in a co-working space.
Okay, so I have been in the communications industry for about 20 years now. I moved to Hong Kong 15 years ago. I came over with Panasonic, and then I went into an agency, and I was working in an office space, which was wonderful, but then I fell pregnant and had a very difficult pregnancy, and then decided to set up my own business to allow for more flexibility. So for about 10 years, I was working from home or in coffee shops and restaurants, and it just wasn't an ideal situation. And that's when I started to look for co-working spaces. And I looked for about 15. I looked at around 15 to 20 before I could find the ideal one, which I'm now in and have been in for 2 years.
Okay. We'll go back to what that space is later. But sure. Mark, tell us your story, because your company is kind of new to co-working, right?
Right. We were in the same space for over 25 years, I think. I was in the same building in Wan Chai for over 30 years.
Like a traditional office building.
Office building. An office building that, it was Telecom House, and they specialized in news and telecommunications. And it was the central hub for years for all the news broadcasters.
Right. Was RTHK
in Hong
there
Kong.
As well?
Everybody was there.
Yes.
All the international broadcasters, BBC, the Associated Press, WTN, everybody was CBS, all the Europeans, the Americans, everybody. And we were basically last man standing, except for TVB, who had their central office there, right next to where we were. And they kept raising the rent in a way that was getting unaffordable. So we decided that we should start looking around, and all of my younger staff kept saying, co-working. And I kept saying, no. And then finally, I said, all right, I'll take a look. And we went around and we looked at some, and I thought, this is possibly not such a bad idea. And then we found a wonderful spot in Sheung Wan for a regular office with a glorious view of the harbor. And I thought, okay, I want to do this. But then I did the numbers, and I saw what it was going to cost. And I said, you know what? That's crazy. And we just went to Wan Chai to Campfire,
right,
which has 5 or 6 floors to choose from. And we halved our rent.
Halved your rent, really?
We halved it, and we effectively have more space because we can use any of the floors that we want. But we have 2 dedicated offices, a equipment room, and then because there was a small problem with our main office, Campfire gave us an additional space to store some of our files and other valuables.
So as landlords, do you find that the co-working owners are more flexible than the
Much
traditional
more.
landlords? Okay, so
Much
both
more.
on price and what they'll
I mean,
give you.
the folks at Campfire gave us, basically you can do it on a ad hoc basis, a monthly basis. We opted to go for 15 months, whereas the other place, either staying in Telecom House or going to the new place in Shangwan, would have probably meant 3 years.
3 years, because that's the standard commercial
And
lease.
it just a standard commercial
Yeah.
lease with and it just didn't make any sense with what it was going to cost. So this just seemed like the best option, and the folks there at Campfire have been very, very helpful in trying to accommodate our needs when there are problems. They really try to bend over to help us out. That's been good.
That's good. Angela, what was your experience? How did you settle on the place where you're at now?
I looked at quite a few co-working spaces, and one of the challenges that I found was that quite a few of the spaces were quite small.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody who needs a
You need to
bright
spread your
air.
things
I
out.
need to spread my things out. I need a bright, airy room. When I'm interviewing, again, as I mentioned, some of the topics that we cover are quite challenging and quite personal. So I needed to know there was enough space around me for other people not to overhear conversations. But one of the reasons I chose this space was because the location is ideal. It's in Central. It's Eaton Club. And the floor is just wonderful.
I've actually been there. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Beautiful space, lots of light coming through. The staff's fantastic.
Can you describe it to listeners who may not have been there? I mean, when you walk into the lobby, I guess, or into the area, what it's like?
It's heaven. As an office space, as a co-working space, it's everything that I want.
Yeah.
It's you walk in and the staff are very friendly. They greet you immediately, ask you if you want coffee or tea or a drink. They remember what you want. You walk into the office and there are lots of tables. And the nice thing about this space is there are not a huge amount of people in there. So there's enough to have social interaction and meet some really lovely people. And you have your conversations, but then you're able to get back to work. And there are round tables, square tables, long tables. They've really covered everything that you need to feel comfortable.
And are there also private offices that you can rent?
There are
Okay.
private offices,
Yeah.
and that's on the other side. So you have one side that's dedicated to this open space, which they, in the afternoons or during the day, sometimes they use for events. And then there's, across the hallway, there's another space, which are the private offices. And if, sometimes they've been very considerate, if I am running a private interview, they'll allow me to use that private space
okay.
to they recognise
Yeah.
different people's needs and accommodate accordingly.
So you mentioned that you can run into people and have social interaction. That's always been touted as one of the benefits, that you'll meet these cool people and you'll cross-fertilise ideas. Does it really happen?
It does happen, actually. I've met some really good people. And actually, recently I met somebody, Stephanie Meyer. She was actually on the show.
I know Stephanie,
recently.
yes.
She's fantastic. And we'd been sitting side by side for quite a few months. When one day we were placed at this rather bizarre table setting, because there were quite a few people in that day, we got talking and the conversation just blossomed. We learnt so much from each other, and there were so many opportunities that came to mind as a result of it.
Right, yes.
So you do meet some really special people there, but we're all respectful of the fact that we're there to work.
Yeah.
So we'll have our mini conversations
And then you'll get back to work.
and then get back to
Yeah.
work, which is perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Mark, what about in your space? Do you guys interact a lot? Or
Well, that's one of the problems that we've found, that maybe it's just our floor, and maybe there's a lot more interaction on some of the other floors. But some of my guys have complained to me that the neighbors are snobby, or they're unfriendly, or
they're snobby
they're
young
not,
tech startup
you know,
people?
Yeah, and then so there hasn't been the same kind of cultural collision that becomes the talking point of these co-working spaces. They promote it, that this is what's going to happen, and they do have Friday afternoon drinks parties, and they have the other morning they had a breakfast hour or so, but it doesn't seem to be happening as organically as we thought it might. I mean, people work in their little clusters, they stay to themselves, and they don't necessarily interact, which I find is kind of unfortunate. But when I kind of polled my guys the other day, they were all saying how much they loved it. And they really do. I mean, that they enjoy the space, and that, yes, it might take time to meet other people, but that's okay. That's not a big deal.
Because you haven't been there that long, right? When did you move?
July.
July. Okay, so it's really just a few months, yeah. And then compared to your previous space, how do your staff like it? Both culturally and physically.
They actually seem to prefer it. And I was very surprised.
Really? Why were you surprised?
I just didn't expect it, because we've been in the other space for so long. And maybe it was me. Maybe I was the one who loved the old space, and everybody else was just going along.
It was so familiar to you.
Because it was like my second home. You know, I've been through so much in that one office for so many decades. But everybody said they love this space. They love the options that we have. They love, there's a kitchen on our floor. There's a studio downstairs where we can shoot interviews when we want. And they just like the freedom and also the light. We all want lots of light. Yeah. And, you go into these different floors, and it's like an old factory building with light just streaming through. Right. And it's great.
Yeah. Yes, I'm very conscious now that we are in a windowless room with totally artificial light.
Well, we forgive you.
Yes, but that's the studio. That's the way it is. So one thing I was interested in is the idea of privacy. Angela, you're saying that sometimes you're interviewing people about sensitive topics. And the other thing that I noticed, because I freelance, I work in a lot of other people's offices, and the trend is this open plan office where you're sitting right next to someone and someone's sitting right opposite you. And when you have a phone conversation, everybody can hear everything.
Right.
Can you get privacy in these co-working spaces?
I think that was why I ultimately went with Eton Club, because the other spaces that I saw, it was so obvious that I would start to feel claustrophobic. There wasn't enough light coming through. If I needed to have a private conversation with somebody, which is on a regular basis, it wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen, which would make the contributor feel entirely uncomfortable and defeat the whole purpose. But with this space, even the tables are just quite far from each other, and it's so easy to just move around and make sure that you're in a place where you can have the conversations that you need to have.
And you're also not overhearing other people's conversations?
No. Okay. Unless I'm really curious, and then I get as close as possible.
Unless you want to.
Yeah.
So you both seem to be pretty happy, but there must be some cons, right? There must be something that you don't like about co-working.
Actually, for me, the only thing has been that, I was just a little bit disappointed that some of the other folks don't seem as friendly or as outgoing as
they're advertised to be.
And, I think that there was the hope that we'd get to meet people in other businesses that we could interact with and exchange ideas with. And it's not happening as much as we wanted. But overall, I think I mentioned to you the other day that I got a bit of feedback on, how people would come up with an I'm losing my metaphorically speaking, like if you're renting a car, you're in a co-working space. If you're leasing a car, towards a purchase, you're in a 3-year deal with a landlord. Or, as somebody else said, you're with a starter girlfriend and you really like her, but you know that the relationship isn't going to last, but you really like the relationship, and that at some point you're going to meet the woman that you marry, and that's going to be the space that you rent for 3 or more years, or that you purchase a space to have that as your office.
Okay, that's an interesting analogy.
I'm never going to put my space in the same way.
And that those were analogies coming from my millennial staff. So.
Oh, well, that says a lot about their attitude towards marriage, I think. More than
that's
about
why they're all
work.
single.
So if someone's thinking about, going either from a home office to co-working space, or they're just starting out, what should they look for when they're going around and visiting all these spaces?
I think looking at something that fits your personality.
Okay.
And for me, I like to drop my children to school. I have 3 kids. I like to drop them to school in the morning. and then walk to work, and it's a 15-minute walk from school. And sometimes, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, so eek, that's the only exercise I'll get in the whole day,
right.
because I'm so task focused. I've got my head down, I'm bashing away at my keyboard. And then I realise 6 or 7 hours later that I've barely moved. So, so back to your question, it's really what fits for you as a person and what feels right for you. I can't work in a space that's contained. I do need bright light. I do need space. And I need it to be, I need to be able to go outside and be able to walk around if I remember to do so. So really what feels right to you.
Yeah, okay.
Well, speaking to that, actually, we have a gym in our facility.
Oh, fantastic.
And in the mornings, it's packed.
Really?
Everybody uses it. And then there are showers nearby.
That's really good.
And,
And was that like a feature that you were looking for, or they just happened to have it?
They just happen to have it.
How many spaces did you look at before you decided on where you are now?
30.
30, really? And what was...
And then, but then we also looked at other co-working spaces. This space promotes the fact that it's creative or it's IT. Then they have another space, I think, in Causeway Bay that's more business oriented, and they have another space in Hong Kong that's more mixed facility. But we chose it mostly for the space available, the look and feel of it, and the location. I mean, because some of the others that we looked at just felt too corporate,
which
is not part of our personality.
Yeah.
You know, ours is a little funkier than that. So
Creative.
Wan Chai just seemed to make more sense.
So it's interesting that they do seem to have, these spaces do have different personalities.
They do,
right?
they do.
So some of them are designed for the tech startups and
Right.
maybe the fintech people, and then others are for more creative people.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on to share your experiences of co-working. Maybe if the listeners are out there and they're thinking about it, they have a better idea of what to look for. So thanks so much to Angela and Mark for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
All right, you're listening to the 123 show. It's 10 minutes to 2 now. We've got time for a few more songs. Here's U2 with Who's Gonna Ride Your Wild Horses?
You're dangerous.